Let's get right into this. I ain't playing around this time. I have just finished watching a video on a white woman going around talking about the education system. And for the most part, I agree with what she was saying with the basic level of understanding people have today about the education system. But it goes far deeper than that. It goes far deeper than that. It goes far deeper into an understanding of why I have certain problems with teachers, why I have certain problems with the education system as a whole. As an astrologer, I'm going to first preface this by saying I have Pluto in Sagittarius. I hate Pluto, Sagittarius, higher education, higher learning. That's what it generally means. But it also means I have personally in my life experienced hate in my life from the education system. I experienced hate from teachers in the form of racism. I've experienced hate in the form of bullying from students. So, to not come in a biased perspective, this is how the universe, this is how God has aligned my chart to be. And for any of you who doesn't know anything about Pluto, Pluto is not a planet that only affects you personally, it is a generational planet. Pluto stays in any zodiac sign longer than any other planet. So you need to understand this. Pluto through Sagittarius was about a 13-year transit, anywhere from 13 to 15-year transit that transpired. So that means an entire generation of people born from around 95 to '08. This was the generation of children who are going to have problems, are going to experience some form of hate, some sort of power system when it comes to education, whether they gained power from it, or they despised it, or they were even able to see criminal activity go on within it. Everyone within that age bracket. That would put you anywhere from 25 all the way down to about 16, 24, 16, about 16 years old. 16 to 14, the youngest. Why do I come here to preface the education system right now and why it is flawed? There are many reasons why this education system is flawed. And before I go into literally why or where it started and what had caused it to get to this point here today, I'm going to just break down why the system fundamentally does not work. And this is not my own opinion. These are facts and these are opinions of other professional teachers themselves who have given me this information. Books that I have read that tells about this information. I do not come here to just spew on and ramble about things that I think are problems. There are things I can for objectively say are fact, are problems with the education system. For example, for example, let's get right into it. I respect the teachers who have to put up with the BS in the education system. But at the same time, I have problems with them as well. I have problems with them as well. How are you going to work in a system? How are you going to work in a place that kills education? How are you going to work in a system where you cannot fully express how you want to teach the child? You are basically racing against the clock to fit a curriculum set for you that you have proven time and time again does not benefit the entire class. It doesn't benefit the entire class. Only certain select few will ever do well to do phenomenal in a certain subject. But yet you sit here, complain about it, or even do the opposite, try to fight for it, when the results never go the way. In theory, they should go. That is your first indication. Just off the bat, it doesn't work. I once did a speech while I was in high school. I once did a speech while I was in high school for a public speaking elective that I took. I was the only student who spent the entire class ranting on why I had distrust and dislike for the education system. Let me go over some of the facts and details that made sense. We're going to specifically talk about the United States for a second. That's where I'm from, and that's how I get down to business. How is it that we live in a society where, regardless of what job you may have, because that's what this education system prepares you to do, to get you a job, to get you a career, it's supposed to prepare you to get a career that will service you and your family for the rest of your life. That's the point of the education system in a nutshell. It is supposed to prepare students of any age, whether you are in pre-K or you're taking a university level class. It's supposed to prepare students for the lives they have on ahead. But you need to understand this as well. From pre-K all the way to the 12th grade, where a child is now considered legally or would be around legal age on average to now go to college, to now be a functioning member of society. Why is it that every single last person in the US is required to pay taxes, is required to rent a home, is required to do all of these things, but it is not mandatory teaching? Why isn't budgeting a mandatory class that you had to take in school? It wasn't mandatory at all. Certain classes don't even provide the elective to learn how to do taxes, to learn how to budget for rent in an apartment, to learn how to budget your food and diet. But everyone, whether you are an immigrant or you were born here in this country, is legally required to pay taxes, is legally required or expected to buy a home, to pay bills, to manage their money. But that primary thing that everybody, regardless of what job or career you end up getting or business you end up starting, is not taught in school. Is not taught how to be done in school. You are taught how to read, you are taught how to do math, but you only learn how to count. You don't learn how to budget money. You don't learn about economy systems. You don't learn how to put two and two together to understand, okay, this is going on, that's going on. You don't learn about any of that. You were thrown into side electives. You were thrown into science classes. You were thrown into arbitrary history classes. You do not learn the fundamentals of how to maintain and be a functioning legal citizen in this society once you get out of mandatory preschooling. You can opt out of school at the age of 18. Some places you can opt out of school in this country around the age of 16. But you are forced by law, unless you know you can opt out, unless you write a letter to your state telling your state, I will not be sending my child to a school, you are now then obligated, forced, and can be imprisoned for not sending your child to an education system. And in that same education system, where they are now forcing their children to go, because they do not even teach the majority of people or let them know it is only an option that you need to send your child to school, that you can write to your state and let them know you will not be sending them to school. That's not even taught in school. I never heard that. It was only until after I had left the education system that I found that on my own, through my own personal studies. That is not information they want you to know. That is not information that is talked anywhere in the news. So you go through your entire mandatory period of time that you are forced to go to school, or legal charges can be pressed upon you. But in that period of time, before you personally decide to go to college or not, decide to go to higher university or not, you don't learn how to do taxes. You don't learn how to budget for food and money. You don't know how to do rent. You don't know how to do a mortgage. You don't know how to do your own you don't know how to do anything of accounting. You're not even learn how to read certain documents. You don't know how to set up a marriage document, how to set up a prenup. You do not even learn how to read certain fields of work. You don't know how to read assignment papers, agreement papers that you may need if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to be buying a house. You don't learn any of that. You don't learn any of that. And you may get an elective in a class for that. You may. But that doesn't even add to overall credits that you need for university. And if you were to go to university, you now personally have to go out of your way to learn those things. Why was I mandatorily supposed to learn history, science, grammar in grade school before I was legally allowed to make a decision for myself, before I was mentally capable of making a full on decision for myself? Why was I learning things that 90% of people, unless you went into those fields yourself in college, will never retain ever again? If you're going to be a banker, why the science class you took in the 8th grade matters? Why does that matter? Why does banking matter? If you're going to be a banker, why does learning about geology matter? Why was that a mandatory class you had to take? Why? What does reading Huckleberry Finch had to do with me getting my construction job? Why isn't this even a mandatory class? We have many instruction workers, construction workers. We have many bankers. We have many nurses. We have many. These are the most primarily accepted universal jobs that are needed for a society to run. Why aren't those mandatory topics and subjects that we need to learn about? If the majority of people do them, why aren't we even learning about that? Am I to say that every single last thing we learned in grade school, quote unquote, did not come with us in life? No. The only things that carried on was basic mathematics, that most people forget how to do advanced mathematics anyways. Most people only know how to really add and multiply. Most people cannot subtract large numbers or even divide. Most people forget how to do that. I, to a certain extent, had to forget how to do that. But when I came back into learning something personally, when it comes to astrology, I had to go and reteach myself how to do that. We were not taught what is mandatorily needed to live in this society. We were not taught how to do things that were going to keep us afloat, keep us in check, keep us out of prisons. We weren't taught how to do these things. And if you want to talk about social issues, social issues, we don't even get into that personally. We are not taught how to properly, quote unquote, vote in school. We are not taught which government official, how to run for office, how to speak with congressmen, we're not taught anything about how to actually interact with our society. The most people know is, I'm gonna go vote for my president every 4 years. Most people don't even know the governor, know the congressman, know the senator of their own state. We're not taught any of that. We're not taught any of that. But people love to complain. People love to throw around these claims of this group of people don't know anything. You don't know anything. My political view is right. My understanding of the world is right. This job is better than that job. This field is better than that field. How do you know? Where did you learn that? You had to go to school same way I did. Where did you learn how to do your taxes? Where did you learn how to mortgage your property? Where did you learn how to do any of that? All these things are apparently required by you to have already been learned by your family. Or you're supposed to go to higher education that you personally have to choose to pay for to go to yourself or get a scholarship for and now hit the mandatory requirements to go and learn yourself. But all those years, on average, by the time you hit 18 years of age, some people graduate early, you may get into college by 10 years old. But all that time you spent in the school system pr- prior to you going to higher education, if you choose to, what did you need to learn besides how to speak the main spoken language and do basic mathematics? You could have just sat on the TV and watched the news and learned what president was going to be there. So you didn't need to learn history. You could have just went online, went to your local science fair. You could have just went to a museum if you wanted to learn anything about how to do astrology, how to do astronomy, how to do geology. These are all subjects that we should have been taking in college, in higher education, not the other way around. We shouldn't have been learning about things that were going to be supplementary, optional while we were children, with our minds just being able to develop. And then now in college, we now, if we want to, finally learn how to properly manage a household, a society, government structures, all of that. And for anybody who would try to make the claim those subjects were too hard to understand as a child, nobody's going to make that claim. Nobody could make that claim because that's idiotic. That is idiotic. A society, a government cannot expect legally, because not everybody pays taxes. There are criminals in society, quote unquote. Not everybody follows the rule system. There are criminals. But if society and the government both agree that the average person can be penalized by the law if you do not do certain things, if you do not know how to keep up with certain things, regardless of where you come from, regardless of what economic background you come, as long as you are of legal age and you want to live in the society and you are doing certain things, you are required to do X, Y, Z, or you will be penalized for it. And then they will take your rights away. Why is all of that not mandatory to learn? Why is all of that pushed to the side? Why was all of that not set up for us to learn? But yet, the education system is a mandatory thing, quote unquote, which it's really not, like I explained earlier, that most people have to go through and do. The education system does not work. It is not designed for the mass of society to do well. It is not designed for the mass of society to do well. In fact, it was never designed to do that. It was never designed to do that. It was never designed. And I'll tell you why. The education system started off as a way for children who had just gotten out of the labor force. Because you must understand, there was a period in time back around when this country first started. Remember, we are only currently now just talking about the US. I will talk about other countries going further down. Let's just stick to the US. What we do learn in history, what everybody seems to know, is the quote unquote official founding of this country was in 1776. That's everybody knows Independence Day. Nobody or majority of people cannot really tell you what happened on said day or why things happened on it. But for some reason, we all celebrate it, right? Most of people in society around that period of time did not know how to read. They were illiterate. Whether they were a free person or not, they were illiterate. Most people only learned from their families. They learned trades. They learned how to properly do and follow things that they wanted to do. There was no mandatory place that the collective had to go to learn something. It didn't start off like that. Before we really had education systems, we had people working in jobs. The industrial system, businesses were brought up first and in larger quantity than education systems. Than education systems. The education system as a whole, the education system as a whole was only brought up primarily to keep children out of the workforce because business owners at the time were brutally beating workers out of everything that they owned, paying them unlivable wages at the time. Unlivable wages at the time. And requiring them to work massive hours. For the adults who already had problems with this, they were going on strike. But for the children who were doing this, they found it unacceptable. Therefore, they started to build more institutions to keep children at bay while the parents went out to go to work. The education system did not really start off as a system to teach children anything. It started out as a place to hold children in the meantime while their parents were doing all the working, because laws were just passed that children cannot do what they have to do. Over time, business owners and people who funded education, people who funded for more universities to be started, people who put funding in the money into for more of these industrialized places to be set up and built, of course, had the ability, had to right to regulate, had the right to regulate how is it going to work, how is it going to be appropriated. How do you expect me to give you the money for you to even run the institution that you're running, but you're not going to expect me to not demand you run it this way? You need to understand this for a second. When it comes to the education system, when it comes to the education system, teachers are not paid phenomenally well in society. This is something that most people do not have an idea of because they're one, not told about it, and two, you need to be of a higher mind to even think like this. You need to understand this. Whether you want to believe it or not, schools need to keep themselves open. Schools have to pay light bills. Schools have to pay for desks. Schools have to pay for books. There is money involved in keeping the education system alive, just like any other house that a person may live in or any other business that a person must work in, somebody has to pay to keep the schools open. Now, the schools aren't a home. Everybody knows you go to school, you leave, or you rent an apartment in a university, and when you're done living on campus, you're done with your stay, you're done giving them the money to learn, you leave and somebody else comes in. School is not a home. School is not a foster care. That is not what the education system is. So school is not closer to a home. School is closer to a business, whether you want to believe it or not. And we are not told in the news XYZ school made 10 million plus dollars this year. They don't advertise school like that. That is not how school is advertised. You may hear XYZ amount of scholarship money was made. How does scholarship money work? How are people just giving children money to learn? How are you just paying for a someone to go to a university, for example, live in a dormitory, provide them electricity, provide them running water, and the only thing that they are doing theoretically is going into a class for someone else to teach them how to do XYZ amount of work. They're not providing any labor. They're not running the plumbing systems. They're not controlling the electrical boxes. How are schools being maintained? You learning in general is not going to keep the lights on. You learning in general is not going to put books on the table. Real life logic doesn't go out the window just because you started learning. And I already explained to you, school is not a home. They're not your parents. They're not just going to take care of you in every single last need. Because even as parents expect things from you. And after a certain period of time, your parents get old and you may have to start taking care of them, or they might need you out of the house at a certain point. Schools are businesses, but schools are not necessarily providing a service. Sure, schools may have you paying for the books, schools may have you paying for whatever services that they need, raising fundraisers and things like that. But not every school is privately owned. You will have privately owned institutions where they will tell you your donations, the amount of money you make, is given to you. Publicly owned institutions, publicly owned schools, they're told your tax dollars are being paid for the school. So so the government apparently is taking money out of the taxes that you are apparently, remember, everyone in society, regardless of what your job is decided to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes. So if everybody has to pay taxes, everybody apparently has to pay taxes, but they do not even teach you how taxes work in mandatory quote unquote schooling. What is my money even going towards? What is my money even going towards? You cannot force a person, an entity, a conglomerate, a group of people cannot force people to spend their money, to spend their money to send people, to send another group of people to an institution and not have a say over what the children should be learning. How? Think of this in theory. You go to work, your boss is telling you you need to take money out of your own pocket to send somebody else, to send somebody else to a place I want them to go to, and you don't have a say over it. You don't have a say over what they're doing, how they're going to do it. You're paying for a service. You are told, you are literally told, I am going to now pay for this service. Part of the money that you make, You're going to be paying for this service, and you're not going to have control over what you get out of the service. We're going to control what you get out of the service. And if you don't listen to us, we're going to penalize you for it. How does that work? How does that work? A group of people are going to tell you how to spend your money. You don't get a say over it. And if you don't do what they say, you get penalized for it. That sounds like an abusive household. That sounds like an abusive business arrangement. That sounds like an abusive relationship between the people and their government. But I told you already, somebody has to be funding these schools. How were most of these institutions built? They weren't primarily just built off of tax dollars. They were donators. You ever heard of alumni for schools? Have you ever heard of people who once went to said XYZ school making large donations to the school? You never heard of certain business owners or certain companies or certain institutions, businesses, famous people making large donations of some of the money to schools? These are how the first institutions, these are how the first schools came up. Remember, when school was a new thing, nobody was just jumping on the bandwagon, let's send people here. You won't find that information anywhere. Somebody had to make the initial donation of money to get these institutions off the ground. That's how life works. And of course, the same people who made these donations to get these schools afloat, to get these schools started, are going to be the same people who are going to control the curriculum. We are not taught in school to put two and two together. We are not taught critical thinking skills. You know why? Because the people who funded these institutions, whose name, whose business is tied to the ownership of the land, the ownership of the property of where these schools reside, decided and made it so the children now mandated to go to these institutions don't learn critical thinking skills, don't learn how to properly work in these societies and manage themselves. You know why they don't want you to? Because the same people who paid for and are running and are making up the rules for the education system are the same people providing the jobs for a majority of society. This is not a conspiracy theory. How do you, as a society, how do people accept the idea that famous people tend to know each other, rich people tend to know each other? But as soon as you bring up any idea of this rich person knows this rich person and they're friends, maybe they're helping each other out. This rich person in business is friends with this rich person in the education system. Maybe they're helping. No, 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 that can't be the case. You have a friend who's a gardener, and you're a person who provides flower pots. You're trying to get your business started. So you ask your gardener friend to start putting some of his plants in your flower pot so you can take pictures. Everybody's going to be okay with that idea. That idea makes sense. But as soon as you say somebody who's also a person just like you, except they have money, except they have status, as soon as you bring up the idea that they're doing the same thing, conspiracy theory cannot be the case. Not how it works. You see how people think? You see how society really thinks? How many how many blocks, how many walls they will put up to stop putting pieces together? And I told you, for the most part, it's not most of society's fault because this has been going on for hundreds of years since the start of this country. People who are in power do not want to let go of power. You can read any success story. You could read any book. Somebody who started, quote unquote, from the mud, per se, who reaches a level of status are not going to want to return back to the mud. Somebody in business is not going to want to let their competition beat them out. So they're going to do everything that they can to keep themselves in power. Think about it for a second. If everybody really thought logically, thought properly, there would be no need for this education system. Because you have to think, we are a group of people, whether you believe in religion or not, or you believe in evolution theory or whatever the case. We didn't have schools back then. We didn't have education systems back then. You probably had one preacher. You probably had one priest. You probably had one sort of higher level thinking person for your entire village, your entire society. And that was it. Everybody else already knew how to grow their crops. Everybody else already knew how to build their homes. These are all trades. These are all skills that people need or use or have already in society. That's why I said earlier in the video, you're never going to run out of people in the medical industry. There's always going to be a need for doctors. You're never going to run out of people in the construction industry. There's always going to be need to build more buildings, build more houses, whatever the case may be. You're never going to run out of plumbers, electricians, people who have tangible trades and crafts. But we are not how to taught. We are not even made relevant of how to learn or do any of these main things as children. These are all things that we have to either go to university to learn or just apply for as soon as we come out of school and hope that your business provider, your boss, the person that you are in line with helps you out. We are not taught how to properly survive in school. You are not properly taught how to learn for yourself in school. You are taught how to work for somebody else because somebody else at a certain period of time was in power and decided to use their power to make sure that people just like them, their family and members and people who agree with the ideas just like them, stay in power, stay in control, stay in leagues to be for themselves. That is what this education system is based off of. That is what society as a whole right now is based off of. That simple concept of somebody wants to be in power, so they're going to keep their power. And you know what this system does also? If you are a person who decides to think for yourself, you are now outcasted. You are now considered weird. If you know any piece of information or talk on any single piece of information that goes against any way that society believes about not only the education system, but how society believes about their politics, how society believes about how medication should be run, how society believes about how politics should be run. If you are in any way, shape, or form to go out your way to learn hidden knowledge, to think for yourself, they also have been programmed psychologically to believe that person is not good for me. This person is not good for my family. This person is odd. This person is weird. This person is a loser, quote unquote, unquote. And now the individual who has come to this realization themselves now grows insecurities, now grows to now hate themselves, now grow to have problems that would discourage them from wanting to strive away from culture, strive away from society. And that's the case that has always been. Hasn't it gotten better over the years? Yes, because this is not a new problem. This is a problem that has plagued humanity since the time humanity has started. There's always been the group versus the individual. This is not a new concept. This is not a new concept. There's always been the mass versus the individual. This has always been what people want to believe and universally accept versus what is actually true and is actually right. We have been doing this as a humanity since the dawn of time, but people are so indulged in their programming per se. People are so indulged on what they have been culturally taught to do. It's hard for them to now want to think about doing things properly. Again, you are not taught in society to think this way. You are not taught in society to believe this way. Therefore, anything that you try to do to try to learn said things is going to be hard for you. But it's not, listen to what I'm about to say, it is not hard to see that the system doesn't work. Every child, no matter what the age, as early as 4 years old to a 37-year-old repeating student in college, going to take on multiple majors, multiple PhDs, can all tell you at some point in their lives, they had the idea in their mind, they don't like school. School doesn't work. This doesn't make sense. Why am I forced to do this? It doesn't matter how much somebody may try to force down the truth. The truth is the truth. The truth will always prevail no matter what an outside external force may do, because that's how reality works. Water is water. It does not matter how much I try to force you your entire life to believe that water is coffee. And I tell you, when you drink water, you're going to pee more. When I tell you you drink water, you're going to be more excited. It doesn't matter how many placebo effects I may place on your brain. Water is water, and you're going to innately, naturally, in line with the universe, in line with creation, understand that that is not how this thing is supposed to work. This is not how this actually works. No one, no being, no government, no force will ever be able to defeat natural law, will ever be able to defeat the truth. You don't need to argue it. You don't need to spend your entire life, per se, trying to go figure out what is right. You know. Should you act upon what you know is right? Should you act upon what you know to be true? If everyone else in your society is going to be hesitant, you are naturally going to be hesitant as well. I'm not here to blame anyone, call anybody an idiot. I am here to explain to you why these things work, why the society that we have it is the way that it is because we have been conditioned to believe the left wing is worse than the right wing. We have believed to be conditioned drug dealers are all criminals. We have believed to be conditioned that God is a person that comes from a Bible. We have been believed to condition all of these things are true. There is a right way and a wrong way. My side is right, your side is wrong. Anything that I say and believe must be true. What society says as a whole must be true. This individual must be wrong. You've been conditioned to believe that. But no one needs to be scared. No one needs to be in fear. Nobody needs to necessarily be depressed if you are a person who thinks properly, who thinks logically. There will always be people like you. Because again, we are in the right no matter what happens. And as long as you live by what is right, what is natural, what is true, you will always be fine. You will always be fine. You will always be fine. And this is even explained as we go back into it, as I started this lecture in astrology. We are currently in the age of Aquarius. What is Aquarius per se? Aquarius is odd. Aquarius is weird. Aquarius is technology. Aquarius is unnatural. We live in an age where we are forced, quote unquote, to go into institutions that are against what is naturally occurring. We are forced to use technologies that are not naturally occurring in society. We are forced to use machinery that is not naturally occurring. We are forced to now think and believe in ideas that go against how things naturally are to be. This is not something that was just created by the government. I had to start off the conversation by getting you to understand that the government, the education system, business owners, rich, wealthy people are participating in this system. But now that we have gotten past that point, I'm now going to tell you this is not something that just extends to quote unquote evil people who are trying to do you wrong. This is a part of, this is an aspect of all of creation. You are not taught, again, in your school system, in your cultures, in your religions. You are not taught that quote unquote evil has a place in reality. You are taught that everything must be right. Everybody there, and we should strive to be in a world of complete and utter peace. You are taught that. Again, not your fault if you didn't know this, but you need to know in the universal creation, in natural order, in what has been created and ordained by quote unquote God, there is a part in the system where humans, animals, nature itself, because whether you want to admit it or not, we as humans are against are a part of nature. We come from nature. We are not separate from it. Even if you were to go back and read any of your religious books, it even states this in the first chapters of Genesis. The one they call God created the world first, created the planet first, created the oceans, the seas, the trees, created it first. Then he put us in here. You are not separate from the world that you live in. You are not separate from the world that you live in. You are a part of this world. You do not run it. Aquarius is humanity. Aquarius is humanity. And humanity is tied into odd, weird, unnatural. We are the only species on this planet that will go out of our way to make and terraform this world to be how we want it to be. So when you see a business owner, when you see a government official, when you see people in society doing harmful or wrongful things, should you go out your way to stop them? Yes, you should. Yes, you should. But at the same time, have a level of understanding. They are in the exact same system that you are. They are in the exact same world. They are governed by the exact same rules. They are governed by the same laws of physics that you are. There is no exception to the rule. There is no exception to the rule. We are all here. We are all here to play a role and play a purpose. Good and evil are subjective terms that we come up with. Society the rest of living creatures on this planet are not concerned with quote unquote good or evil, are not concerned with what is right, what is wrong, are not concerned with an education system. But what they are concerned with, that every person, everybody, every human is also concerned with, what is going to be preferential to us, what is going to be quote unquote better for us. It would be better for you if you could spend your entire life being happy, never having to work, and everything would go your way. It would be better for you if you had control in every day of your life would go right for you. Everything you've ever wanted in your life will go right for you. But that's not how life works. If, for example, you wanted to go to a park and have a game of soccer with your family and you wanted it to be a bright, sunny day, somebody in the world is going to be suffering for that. If you are a farmer that lives in the same town and you have a farm right next to the park, and it has been forever since your crops last got a drop of water, you are now begging the world for rain so your crops don't die out. So the same day that that one kid wanted to have fun with their family on that day, another person wanted crops to grow for their family to survive, for their family to survive, for their business to flourish. Who's wrong in that scenario? Right and wrong are subjective. We as humans will always strive for things that will be preferable to us. We will always strive for what will be preferred by us. And we will always stray away from things that we consider to be harmful, negative, take away, quote unquote, waste time from us. But all of that, complications, problems, no matter how minuscule, no matter how contrived they may be, are all indicated by the Creator. All of it is indicated by the Creator. All is indicated by this universe. The government is going to quote unquote fund people who are going to keep them in power. The government is going to fund people who are going to do their bidding to keep them in power. Per se, that can be indicated by a transit in the sky. Government is Capricorn. Pluto is gangsters. Government, government, criminal activity, veteran criminal activity at that. Bossing and being a boss, business owners, government officials, and criminal activity are all governed by the same sign, are all governed by Capricorn, are all governed by the planet Saturn. Hate, gangsterism, the hidden and the occult is Pluto. All of the social problems that you have been seeing across the world for the past 15 or so some odd years has been, well, Pluto, the sign of hate, the sign of gangsterism, the sign of criminal activity, the sign of power, abuse of power, has been happening in the sign of Capricorn. Hard, seasoned, veteran, criminal, hardened criminal activity. Discipline, disciplinarians, officials. All of this has been indicated. All of this has been indicated. All of this has already been indicated in the birth chart. All of this has been indicated already by the stars, by the heavens. Nothing is separate. Nothing in this reality is truly separate. It's a myth. It's a myth that has been tried to be pushed at hand. And this is why I had brought up this topic here today. All of it, or most of what you have been higher understanding, been taught, wrong. Or is somebody else's idea, somebody else's opinion that's been formed, not for your benefit, but their benefit. And their benefit is going to be your detriment. All of it is being indicated in the heavens, as above, so below. Nothing is truly separate. This is why I can quote unquote change topics like this. The way you've been taught to view society from your westernized education system, from your westernized cultural systems, will tell you you can't think like this, you can't speak like this, you can't put two and two together, you can't quote unquote jump around like that. Nothing is truly separate. You are the same person when you're home, you are the same person at your job, you are the same person when you're in your free time. You do not transform in an entirely different being. You're still the same person. There is no separation in anything that you do. You quote unquote act differently around different people. Again, that is also indicated in the chart. But you are the same person, regardless. And you're no different from anybody else walking the face of this planet. You can talk about race. You can talk about all of these touchy quote unquote subjects. Astrology, the birth chart reads everyone the same. Everyone the same. You may have a preference of you don't like certain people because of XYZ reasons. And I understand that. I understand that. But you must also understand and swallow the pill. The creator made you that way, and you have the ability to see it. You have the ability to track it. You have the ability to know what's going to happen to you next. Know what's going to happen to your family next. Know what's going to happen to the world next. Astrology breaks all barriers and ties everything together. We are all connected. We all can have passion and understanding for one another. We all can realize that this is an experience that we are all sharing. But I've said my piece for today. You can catch me in the next one. I'm out.